welcome back to African Perspective. My name is Zelda. Today we're talking about Ibrahim Traore. If you have no idea what Ibrahim Traore is, don't worry, I've got you covered. If you do know who he is, then you probably already know what we're talking about him today. So basically, there was a US leader, Michael Langley, he's a military leader in the US, who decided to talk about Ibrahim Traore in a very negative way, basically saying that he's been using the resources in Burkina Faso for his own gain. This is a 37-year-old man who decided to take over the country because he saw inadequacies in the former president, and now we have a US leader already trying to intervene. And a lot of people are very angry because they're sensing that this is the US trying to plant seeds here and there so that they can do something similar that people allegedly say they did in Libya. So we're going to talk about all of that today. We're going to see who he is, do a little history background check on him, and then we're going to dive into what exactly is happening in Burkina Faso, what are the greater implications for the continent. We're going to do all of that. So if that sounds great, stick along and subscribe, like, comment, share, all that stuff. So Ibrahim Traore is a 37-year-old Burkina Faso military leader. He came into power basically by he basically led a coup d'etat, which just basically means the military takes over the government and kicks out whatever form of government is going on. So basically what Ibrahim Traore said, or what he cited in his speeches when talking about why he ended up leading this military revolution, is that the former president, Paul Henry Damiba, was not very careful when it came to security. So that was his greatest concern. He noticed it with being a military leader, and he decided to take charge over it. And all of this happened in 2022. So all of this started in September 2022, and it's already been roughly close to 3 years now. And there's been a lot of conversations about Ibrahim Traore in multiple political circles. But the reason I'm talking about him today is specifically, like I said in the introduction, that the United States is starting to talk about him. And that is a red flag, not only for me, but for other Africans as well. We're talking about it like, this has happened before. We're going to talk about it later on, how this is very suspicious, what other African leaders this has happened to. But for now, let's focus on the actions that Ibrahim Traore has taken so far in Burkina Faso. So the first thing, like I said, is the coup d'etat in September 2022. He basically talked about the insurgencies that were going on in Burkina Faso. And he talked mostly about how there are different rebel groups that kept rising up. Some of them were even taking charge of multiple areas in the country. And the former president, Damiba, wasn't being too, very, very aggressive in his approach in dealing with these rebel groups. And because of that, the country was basically deteriorating. And so Traore noticed this as a military leader and decided to take charge. So that was the first thing that happened. Beyond that, he also led the mobilization of the coup d'etat. So he not only was like, I see something wrong, I'm going to do something about it, but he basically led that revolution. Coup d'etats are not always positive, but I think in this case, it ended up working in a positive light. There's always, of course, negatives when it comes to military revolutions, but I think so far there hasn't been typical adverse effects that are typically associated with military revolutions. The way I came into contact, I've never met the guy, I would have to, but the way I ended up knowing about Ibrahim Traore was in roughly February 2023, when he basically kicked out the French. So he looked at his country and he was like, wait a minute, we're in Africa, this is Burkina Faso, why do we have French forces in this country? And he was like, thank you all for your service, get out. And I think that was a very positive move, because I think it shouldn't be like a surprising thing that an African leader is anti-colonial influence, and the French have milked Burkina Faso of its resources, and Burkina Faso is not the only, we talk about French West Africa, they milked the heck out of West Africa. And the fact that there were still French forces in a West African country in the 21st century, it's beyond me. So I support the decision to have kicked them out. A lot of people were not too happy about that, and in part is because after kicking out the French, he brought in the Russians. Now, I personally do not know much about Russian politics. If you all want me to look through it, let me know in the comment section. I will look into it for you. And what relationship Russia has to do with Africa, because I know BRICS, for example, the R in BRICS stands for Russia and the S for South Africa. So there's something going on in there. But I think when it comes to alliances, we need international alliances, but it's just a matter of being careful with who we're making those alliances with. And for Traore, after kicking out the French, he decided to go the Russia and Turkey route. After that, something else that I was personally very impressed with, he did this in 2024, roughly again a year later since he kicked out the French, was that he ended up suspending small scale gold permits. So basically, that means there was a time in Burkina Faso where if you had just a tiny amount of gold, you were allowed to export it. And that basically opens up room for fraudulent activities like illegal exportations. And he essentially just cancelled those sorts of permits, and he said if you're going to export gold, it's going to be in large quantities that are easier to track. And not just that, but he also ended up creating a plan for a gold refinery in Burkina Faso, which is very, very good. His plan is to do 400 kilos a day, which I think is very doable because there is a whole lot of gold in the continent, and I think Burkina Faso, particularly the West African belt, a whole lot of gold, and I think that is something that they should definitely look into doing. Very doable. There is a lot of concerns about whether or not they're going to be able to actually implement 400 kilos a day, but I think it's better to start somewhere. And not just that, but I think the other concern that people have about Traore, and I'm just looking at my notes again, is that not only is he pro-Russia, but recently he ended up extending his term. So like I said, he started his coup d'etat in September 2022. It's now 2025, and he pushed his term for a couple more years. So the next potential election in Burkina Faso is very much TBD, like to be determined, but it could be somewhere in 2029. The reasons that Traore gave for this is that there is potentially concerns about security. There's still issues about rebel groups that are coming up. There are still insurgencies, and he's concerned that for an election to be fair and for an election to be reflective of the people's choices, it has to be during a time where the country is fairly at peace. So I think I see it, and I also don't see it. I'm personally pro-democracy. I think it's not the best of systems, but honestly, it's the best that we have right now. If I don't know if the Greeks ever come up with another form of political government, I'll take it. But for now, I think democracy is what we should lean towards, and part of democracy is very clearly demarcated terms of leadership and the inability of a leader being able to bestow more time on themselves. So I personally will raise that as a little red flag, but not too concerning, because I'd rather that he is in power than some random puppet who's been placed by a Western country. So his vision for Burkina Faso is very, very straightforward. It's very obvious. He's looking for security first. He kicked out the former president because of security. He delayed the election because of security. So it's very clear that he's focused on ensuring that his country is very, very secure. So I like that. He's also very focused on economic independence. So the fact that he kicked out the French and was like, we actually don't want to rely on you anymore. We're going to do things on our own. The fact that he's already pushing for gold refinery, I think these are all very, very positive signs that he's a very serious leader and he's somebody that should be taken seriously. The only concern, and I'm going to be talking about this shortly, is that when leaders in Africa speak about economic independence, it starts raising it's like a bulb goes off in the minds of Western leaders. They're like, oh, they don't want to let Africa be independent. Like, it bothers me so much that they don't want to let Africa just be independent. Just let us be independent. Which is why I'm titling this video, Leave Ibrahim Traore and Burkina Faso alone. Leave them alone. Let them figure it out. I know you people think Africans are stupid, but we can do our own leadership. We can lead our own countries. We can take care of our own resources. So just leave the guy alone. The other thing, speaking about leaving people alone, not very much alone, but he's also very pro-regional unity. So he's thinking of creating some sort of a federation with Mali and Guinea, which are neighboring countries, to be able to create some sort of a unity situation going on. But then when it comes to Pan-Africanism or joint situations, I don't mind something like SADC, for example, or ECOWAS. I don't mind that kind of thing. What I do mind, which is very ironic, English is my second language, which is very ironic, is that the East African community, I'm from Tanzania, so the East African community is a very, very interesting situation. And to me, it's that when we talk about uniting Africa, we already have AU, we already have these regional combinations. And I think to unite two countries, you have to prove that you're able to lead one. That's just my way of thinking about things. It's like you look at the parts first, and then you're able to determine the whole. So if two countries are doing terribly, English is my second language. But if two countries are not doing well, and then you join them together, I really am not for that per se. And I'm not saying, Burkina Faso is doing fairly okay for itself, but it's still a poor country. A lot of African countries are. But when it comes to like Pan-Africanism, combining, making federations, it's just, are you combining resources or are you combining problems? That is my only concern with this whole scenario up in here. So the reason I'm talking about this today, other than the fact that Michael Langley ended up talking shit about him, is that why is it that other leaders in Africa are not doing the same thing as Ibrahim Traore? Because this guy is 37 years old. 37 years old. There are leaders in other African countries, I'm not going to say what African countries, there are leaders who are 60 years old, they're 50, they're 70, some of them are 80 years old, and they are being so nicey with Western leaders, to the point that our countries are being taken advantage of. And to me, like, again, I said this, I have no issue with foreign investments. I have no issue with international relationships. I have no issue with like inviting people to come into the country and see like how you can build like good relationships with other countries. I don't think countries should be isolated. However, I think we're being taken advantage of because a lot of African leaders are not ballsy. They just don't have that, like, just that, I don't have the word for it. Ballsy is the only word I can think of. It's just like, just be bold and say it. If we were being mistreated, like, this deal is not working for us. And I think I'm gonna talk about this a couple weeks from now, days actually, about China, because China is getting very, very, very close to a lot of African countries. And to me, I'm just like, I wonder what we're giving away for Chinese people to keep coming to Africa. That's a topic for another day. But I like that what Traore is doing could already like signify some sort of a geopolitical shift towards reassessing. Basically, I think that's what I'm talking about. Reassessing our Western alliance, the alliances that we've made with Western countries. I think we need to reassess them, especially people who are still, countries that are still very nicey and very close to their to their former colonial masters. Masters makes me very uncomfortable. But countries like Tanzania is fairly okay with the Germans, for example, but we don't speak German in our country. But Burkina Faso, one of the official languages is French, and I think that is probably something that their people feel as well. That they do have other languages, of course, but the fact that they're still speaking a language that still belongs to this day to their colonial masters, I think that might make them feel some type of way. And so I like seeing that there is a geopolitical shift, being like, yes, we acknowledge that you are part of our country's history at some point, but I think that will end today. And I think more countries need to pick that up. I also like that he's taking the resource sovereignty model. I talked about this yesterday in my video about Botswana and the mines and minerals amendment bill. I'll link it somewhere either here or here. You can go watch it later on. And I think it's very important that Traore himself is also adopting we're going to take control of our resources. It doesn't matter whether we're good at it or not. It doesn't matter whether this is something that we've done before or not. But we're going to take control of our resources, because I think that is exactly the direction that all African countries should be headed towards. So the other thing that he's very much for, I spoke about the federation, is regional integration, which I think is, again, an example that other African leaders should be picking up on. Just like, let's work together to some extent. Let's not, there are certain burdens that we should definitely be helping each other with. For example, I think if an African country is experiencing, rebels, and there's internal conflict, civil war, I think it is a good thing that other African countries can go ahead and try and get them to have peace talks, or sending their soldiers to go help intervene, because I think it's way easier actually if Africans intervene compared to Western countries intervening, because it's very unlikely that when an African country is intervening in another African country's issues that they're going to steal their resources. But oftentimes when, I'm not going to name more countries, but the West tries to come in and be like, oh my God, we're trying to intervene for you. Often it's always that they want something. And so to me, I love that Traore again is pushing for regional sovereignty and being like, let's come together and let's have our own independence in deciding our own issues. So I hinted very early on in the video that we're going to talk about how pushing for the ideas that Traore is pushing for has led other leaders in the past into very deep waters. So we're going to look into all the African leaders who have faced very unfortunate ends because of their push for Pan-Africanism, economic independence in Africa, and also regional unity. We're going to start with Patrice Lumumba. Everybody knows Patrice Lumumba. If you don't know, that's totally fine. Africa's history is very much hidden. Patrice Lumumba from Congo. He was assassinated in 1961, allegedly by the Belgians and somebody from the U.S. intelligence force. Mummy from Cameroon was poisoned in 1960, allegedly by French agents. Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, he was ousted in a coup in 1966. It was very much suspected that there was some Western influence going on in there, because he led the people of Ghana to independence. Ghana was the first country in Africa to get independence, but then his people ousted him. Amilcar Cabral from Guinea-Bissau / Cape Verde, assassinated in 1973. Alleged Portuguese intelligence. The one and only Muammar Gaddafi from Libya, killed, we're not even going to mince the words here, killed during a civil war in 2011. This was a very obvious NATO intervention. They termed him as a dictator. They interfered with the whole thing. Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso, who is very much compared to Ibrahim Traore now. So Thomas Sankara was assassinated in 1987, alleged French involvement. Ruben Omyobe from Cameroon, killed 1958 by forces, alleged French-led counterinsurgency. And then Ahmed Ben Bella from Algeria, ousted in a coup in 1965, suspected French, the French are everywhere, suspected French involvement. And then Modibo Keita from Mali, ousted in a coup in 1968, alleged French support. All of this is very much alleged. That's all I'm going to say. But it's very obvious that the one thread that unites all these leaders is that they spoke against colonial masters and colonial powers. They were very much Pan-African. They were very much for economic independence. And these are the accounts that people have investigated and people have been bold enough to speak about. Think of all the other African leaders who died of natural causes. Very, very suspicious acts. So I think basically what Traore is doing is heading towards the right direction. But again, it's something that we need to be very careful about. I think all eyes should be on him right now, because he's leading a revolution, not just for Burkina Faso, but he's already inspiring other leaders in the continent. And I think we should all be very, very, very cautious of what is going to be happening in the next couple months, the next couple weeks, the next couple years to him, because there's already been, I think I was reading an article about this, 18 attempts to assassinate him, but he just has a really, really good team of military leaders around him. I think that's one thing I love about the military, is that there is a very strong, they enforce loyalty and integrity. So I think that has worked really well, because the people that he's led during the coup d'etat are people he probably has been with for a long time. They are very, very loyal to him, which is why he's not been able to be assassinated. So let's keep him in our prayers. Let's keep all our eyes on him, keep following his work, and I think he's going to keep inspiring a lot of youth, a lot of younger people as well. I think this is also a really good thing, because it's showing that young people can lead, and we don't need to wait until we're, 50 years old to be able to lead a country. Of course, with age comes wisdom, but I think this is also a reminder that you don't need to have gray hair on your head to be able to lead a country. So all in all, I think we should leave him alone. Just let the guy do his own thing. He was able to lead a military, okay? He was able to convince military heads, like people who, I think some of the people who think very clearly are people in the military. These people have discipline. These people are strong. He was able to convince them that it's a good idea to take over the country. And the country is doing much better. They've kicked out their colonial masters. They're making better Western alliances. They're pushing for economic independence. I think they're headed towards the right direction. It's not perfect. There is no perfect leader, but that is because they're not perfect people. So for his country, he's doing great so far. And I think we should all just let him be. Just watch him from afar. And if the West tries to intervene, because they're already trying to plant seeds, they're going to start saying he's a dictator. They're going to start saying, oh, he is stealing the revenue from the gold. He's stealing resources. He's doing this and that. They're going to try, especially because he's Muslim as well. I can't imagine all the lies that they're going to come up with. So let's keep our eyes on him, and let's keep him in our prayers. And that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm very excited to hear your comments. Very excited to hear any feedback. And that's the video for today. So you'll see me in the next video. If you have any ideas about future videos, any topics, anything that I rose in this video that you'd like for me to delve into deeper, just let me know and I will. So thank you so much, and